how did you continue to engage staff? Because I know there were, there was that initial process, but I think everybody's found out this process never ends. I mean,
Yeah.
this is an ongoing, it wasn't like, oh, we could have a couple meetings, now it's all good. I mean, this is a never-ending process. So how to continue to maintain and engage staff.
And over time, I have found that those rules sometimes kind of creep in, especially the unwritten rules. It's not on paper, but we're telling people this is what you got to do. And so we kind of continue to have those conversations with staff about what's realistic. And that's kind of what I always go back to. Lately, we've had a lot of big families in shelter. And so when you have lots of kids, you have lots of chaos, you have lots of noise. And I had that vibe of we're maybe being a little too punitive. So we started talking about how can we better support parents and what's realistic. And none of us are our best selves when we're under incredible stress. And so how can we not add to that stress by expecting that you have 5 children and they have to be in your sight at every minute? How can we help them to feel better empowered to be parents? And so it is. It's not ever going to end.
Yeah.
We're always going to be talking about this and looking at what we're doing and how can we do it better.
Yeah, and I find some of the struggle is with new advocates coming on. You know, if you've had a turnover of program or whatever else, and you still have some more seasoned people get it. But my new phrase that I've been using frequently is, oh, they went rogue. And here's the rogue advocate that didn't know what to do in this scenario, and instead of maybe having that conversation with someone, they created a rule. And the good thing is, to go back to my staff meeting analogy, is it comes out when they'll say, well, this was the scenario, and I told them, you can't blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, you told them what? When did that become a rule? Like, I was not aware. Did we change, and I'm not sarcastic and a jerk about it, but there's still that whole, don't go rogue. I would rather you come and ask, and if you're uncomfortable with it, then let's talk about it, and we'll brainstorm ways to handle it. But the struggle is not, it's more of a struggle sometimes today than it was in 2007, just because we have had that changeover. And so then I have to take a look at me. And so have I done my job in the training process of preparing someone that this is the philosophy of the organization and this is how we do things? And so typically when I have the Go Rogue advocate, then we'll sit down and I'll say, hey, let's talk about this. And here's a groovy manual that maybe you can read, and understand why we're doing what we're doing. But it's a constant process. It never stops. It doesn't go away just because we feel like we did it and we arrived. We didn't arrive. Some of us did, and then some of us left.
Some of us left.
Yeah, and then some of us are new, and we have no idea. When you say shelter rules, we have, and if someone looks at me and says, huh, that's my fault.
Yeah.
And so I have to own that, and then we have to work past that.
Yeah.
I think one of the ways that we kept advocates engaged and can continue to keep them engaged is to connect this with some of the other initiatives that they have an interest in and that they are passionate about. And for us, we had trauma-informed care and implementation there. We also had, we were fortunate to have an OVW disability grant. And how do we go about making our services accessible to survivors with disabilities? And being able to learn more and to be able to apply this idea of universal design for accessibility, where you're designing your practices, your policies, your entire environment, how you go about communicating, you're designing it for the widest range of users. And we don't know who is, when somebody calls on the hotline and when they come in through our doors, we need to be prepared, and we don't want to create any barriers. And so it's really stepping back and thinking about, this person who's coming into my shelter, is this a person who has a disability, has a medical condition, has an injury, whether it's a language barrier, whether it's difference of cultural beliefs and values? Will I, with my rules, will I make my services inaccessible for them? And I think that was something that really resonated with a lot of staff who had made that commitment to, whether it was accessibility for persons with limited English proficiency, survivors with disabilities. I mean, there was a way to be able to connect this project with all of that.
And Laura, you and I talked about it before, it seems a lot now, like the population in shelter has changed so drastically with the unique set of needs that are coming in straight across the board. And I feel like as a movement, we've done a really good job of educating people about domestic violence. I really feel like we have. And so when someone calls on the hotline and they say, this is why I need to come there, that's what gets them in the door. But exactly what you just said, there are so many other issues now that didn't used to be there. And so if we have this blueprint of how we think we're dealing with people, we're not doing it anymore. And so all of these other options and the universal care that you're talking about is crucial, I think, to making sure that we meet the needs. And I feel like had we tried to do shelter rolls today, as opposed to then, it would look even completely different than what it looks like right now. I don't know if it would have been easier or harder, truth be told, because the environment is so different.
Yeah, and going back to those reasonable expectations, we know that a coping strategy is often to medicate, self-medicate. And so if we expect that somebody is just gonna come into shelter and suddenly they're gonna be cured, we're setting ourselves up to be frustrated and to have that power struggle. So we need to be reasonable about the job that we signed up to do.
That's why I always say, why are we surprised when women in crisis act like they're in crisis?
Yeah, exactly. That's
I mean, they're going to, right?
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
act like I'm in crisis if I'm in
Absolutely.
crisis.
I think engaging people from the very moment that they are coming to us for as a job as an advocate is to be completely transparent. This is who we are. This is our approach. This is how we do it.
Yes.
And to say we are low barriers and that means this. We are voluntary services and that's what this would mean for you in this role. So we want to, that interviewing process. It's as much of us interviewing them as the advocate interviewing us to make sure it's a good fit. And I think that we've done a much better job of being able to hire and for people to self-select us and to know that it's going to be a good fit.